concludes all operations of the emergency alert system. All stations may now resume regular programming.
For expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
So I was planning on taking a week to recharge, but it's to the point where I feel weird when I'm not making a video, so here we are. I don't really have a plan for this, so I'm just going to talk about some stuff that's, just been on my mind. If I'm wrong about something, or if you just want to add a finer point to it, just leave it in a comment. But let's talk about some current events and tie it all to a quote that I've been thinking about quite a bit. We will have world government whether you like it or not. The only question is whether that government will be achieved by conquest or consent. So that's a quote from James Paul Warburg. Now, a little background. He was well known for being the financial advisor to Franklin D. Roosevelt. His father was banker Paul Warburg, a member of the Warburg family and father of the Federal Reserve System. After World War II, Warburg helped organize the Society for the Prevention of World War III. World government either by conquest or consent. Now, that's pretty heavy, and that's going to be the core concept for this video. So, when I read that quote, a few things come to mind. On the surface, it can be interpreted as a rather audacious and contemptuous way of thinking. Regarding that quote, my first impression, and I would venture a guess that many of you had similar notions, but it's very matter-of-fact, almost taunting in a way, and full of hubris. However, after thinking about it for a while, it may just be my subjective view of it, compounded by my personal distrust for these people, both past and present, as they all seem to have very similar ideas, beliefs, and interpretations regarding the very action of governance. But that's not all. They all seem to have very similar views regarding what it means to actually govern. Now, a caveat to add before I go on. We are going to discuss that quote in relation to psychological principles. While this can and should be evaluated throughout our documented history, from modern society all the way back to the first civilization. And simply, that's because hierarchy, classism, the idea that the ruling class is above their constituents, is consistent throughout every single civilization. It was especially prominent within monarchies, the eras of kings and queens, royalty, the pharaohs, the Mesopotamian societies, all the way back to the first tribal leaders within hunter-gatherer groups. Quite literally, it's consistent throughout all of it. So with that in mind, we are going to apply this thought to the foundation of the US and follow it through the present day. I wanted to make that distinction because there is a clear rift between past ideological concepts and the development of the Republic. The United States was the first formation of a political ideology intent on creating a form of government that truly represented the citizens and moved away from feudalistic and monarchical concepts. Although they had the brilliance and forethought to develop a system predicated on concepts such as having checks and balances on power, limited power, and decentralization, rather than the standard, centralized, rule by decree, royal system, well, unfortunately, they cannot resist or completely avoid human nature. Side note, I'm a little surprised that it took the human race so damn long to realize that centralized, royal bloodline, feudalistic or monarchical systems were not the way to go. To me, as an individual of the present time period, it seems so glaringly obvious. That strange instilled obligation that past tyrannical political systems employed, for everyone to submit to the whim of whichever royal bloodline you were unfortunately beholden to, seems like a rather obviously terrible political system. People should have moved away from that form of governance way earlier in our timeline. I mean, history is littered with brilliant thinkers, but yet still, tyranny was the default political mode. Considering what we have going on in the world today, I guess really things haven't changed all too much. Anyway, although the founding fathers, who were in fact incredibly young by modern comparisons, realized the innate subjugation that underpinned those political systems, as I said, they were unable to fully plan out contingency plans to counter human behavior. I believe they were very, very close to creating a truly miraculous framework of governance, and it did, in fact, set in motion a revolution of thought regarding political systems. The only thing that got in their way was, as mentioned, human nature, and the continued uncontrolled growth of the federal system. This is why I advocate for returning to foundational principles, seeing as to date, this is by far the most effective form of government, and of course, the most fair system ever developed. The decentralized core of the original system, combined with the limits on power, as executed through separate branches, and the recognition of God-given rights, is in itself a true feat of intellectualism. There is absolutely nothing, no tragedy, no moral indifference, no corrupt administrative apparatus, and no social movement that should derail the core principles of the United States. This is the best we have. This is the best we have. And it can be re-implemented. At least, I think it can be. I think government can be scaled back in some manner, relegating power back to the states and removing the de facto control that special interest groups and ideologically aligned administrative states hold. However, so many politicians throughout the entirety of our nation's history, including the politicians serving today, seem to have the same exact worldview. It's almost as if the psychological virus, elitism, was ingrained within the political class of days past, and as they brought in the newly elected, younger representatives, that same mentality, that they are above the rest, was passed down, but was also simultaneously reinforced within them too. A learned psychological trait, a sort of conditioning. In a sense, it should also be attributed to biological evolution as well, as tribalism is imprinted deep within our psyches. In the same way that the first set of humans, in a rather natural progression, realized that strength is in numbers, and when you are exiled and outcast, your survival becomes less and less likely. As a result, as time went on, early humans learned to conform or die. The same exact concept can be applied to the political class. We see it happen today. We elect someone who repeatedly vows to stand up to the establishment, vows to work for the people, and once they get in, they slowly become co-opted into that culture, slowly distancing themselves from their promises, their long-held beliefs, and inevitably, they morph into another crony shill, just another cog in the machine that has, in fact, taken on a life of its own. So tribalism and fitting in with your surroundings is a phenomena that really is as natural as any other biological trait. It developed through a sense of survival, which is naturally, more than likely, we should assume that this truth inherently means that this behavior has deep roots within our species. Now, it takes a lot of introspection, coming to terms with the natural constraints of which we are born with, and really make an effort to identify when we are, in fact, moving in lockstep with the crowd, not out of an understanding of the issue, not out of remaining true to your own personal moral compass, but rather more people should identify when they are moving with the crowd out of some subconscious compulsion. If we look around and take stock of our modern society, our collective actions, which, by the way, are entirely influenced through our technological innovation, but if we really contemplate social movements, I believe you would be hard-pressed to disagree with the notion that we are severely lacking in this introspective characteristic. Yes, a large subsect of the human population does not seem to take the time to determine if they are being subjugated to group mentalities, or if they are truly acting independently. I wish there was a way to reignite this revelation in the masses. That is, if we've ever had this sort of understanding on a grand scale. Sure, there are outliers, but the masses in general have never seemed to be too concerned with the practice. And look, I get it, especially in the historical sense. I mean, you would just have to spend most of your time just trying not to die. So I do understand why there appears to be a lack of this. However, within modern society, I don't know. I don't feel like there is sufficient reason for the majority of the masses to still be in the dark, unable to grasp an understanding of their own consciousness. But anyway, throughout history, you see the same mass hysteria, the same group mentalities, they just surround different subjects. This mentality, this lack of self-understanding, self-awareness, has plagued our species for millennia, since the dawn of man, and especially since the first semi-organizational framework of governance. After all, going with the flow, intentionally blinding yourself to reality, obfuscating your own beliefs, in order to ensure that you, personally, aren't the one making waves, well, logically, could be described as a subconscious effort. A subconscious mechanism to ensure that you are just another face, bobbing up and down, perfectly in time with everyone else, another carbon copy both physically and mentally of the general consensus. Yes, comfort, safety, and conformity go together, contributing and complementing each other. However, the effects of this are decidedly destructive. It leads to one, slowly dimming down their intellectual capacity, their creative streak, and it leads to a damping down of their imagination. It is you conditioning yourself once again subconsciously for the sake of being seen as one of the group. And I hope I'm explaining my thinking on this sufficiently, evaluating psychology in a broad sense, attempting to understand human nature, as, there are distinct commonalities between every single one of us. I mean, just understanding human nature alone can really give you a better grasp on politics, social trends, and even offer you a glimpse into the future. Because the thing is, all of our issues politically, socially, domestically, and yes, even internationally, can be traced back to human nature. No matter how you look at it, we are, as a matter of fact, at the whim of the human condition, and taking these universal truths regarding our evolutionary trajectory, can provide insight into global events that are unparalleled and often overlooked. Okay, so I'm beginning to think that James Paul Warburg claimed this simply because he has that same mentality, and that he truly believed not only that this form of government was and is inevitable, but also that our little minds just couldn't comprehend the rapidly growing complexities that are growing within our system, as a result of their tendency to look down upon their constituents, believing that the general population just were not intelligent enough to understand, not able to understand both the problems and the solutions. Well, from there a culture of separation developed, an us and them mentality, and a two-tiered system began to grow. Yes, the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, the elites, the governors and the governed, the superior and the inferior, and well, this sort of societal separation even continued to descend into the madness of classism. So you are not as wealthy as us, therefore you are beneath us, because you must be an imbecile, otherwise you wouldn't be such a loser. You know, that sort of thinking. And really, it all has roots within human nature. And one of the gravest mistakes that we as a species have made is not collectively pushing back on this. And the real tragedy is that movements that originally claimed to be fighting against classism have been subverted into propagating Marxist ideologies. The video I did about the FBI was all about trying to get people to see that we have to come together to root out corruption. This topic could be a rallying cry for all political parties. But, I don't think many people really want to come together. Political tribalism just gets in the way, as again, this sort of thought process has been ingrained within all of us. We are all cut from the same cloth, and the fact is, we all have these psychological defaults sitting idly by, awaiting their moment to disrupt and dismantle true progress. Yes, instead of realizing the reality of our situation, that we are all in this together, the default seems to be power, even the ones promoting quote-unquote equality and equity. Which, by the way, is really just Marxism, but the point is that they aren't really against classism. They just want to be on top of the new pyramid, the new hierarchy. It's all about power. Now, there were signs indicating that this global transition was inevitable, and the signs go way, way back, even before Woodrow Wilson's presidential term. But this sort of globalism was exponentially exacerbated from 1913 onward. And this goes back to the concept we explored a couple of weeks ago, the one discussing accelerationism, and I'll have to do a follow-up on that concept really soon, because I'm still thinking about it, and I have some more thoughts to put out there. But I guess the point is, when I deliberately take a step back, trying to set aside my personal bias and political leanings, when you really contemplate accelerationism in regard to global development, it brings a sort of clarity to our collective issues, the very issues plaguing the human race today. So at the birth of the United States, we were very, very clearly promoting a grand new idea, a new outlook on life itself, on reality, and really on even the human condition itself. And they developed a political system with a pretty good understanding of human nature, baked right into the fundamental concepts. Power corrupts. Yes, they knew that power corrupts, and the only way to have a true political system that actually represented the people was to have checks and balances on said power. But let's talk about the breakdown of the system. So one of the more interesting aspects to all of this is, well, how did the timing for all of this work out so damn well for the global establishment? What I mean is the fact that, okay. So we know that politicians have been developing a global system for about a century. Now, the concept of a one-world system isn't new. There have been many people who dreamed of this, dating back to Genghis Khan, the Roman Empire, Alexander the Great. They all dreamed of conquering the world and developing one global empire. And, well, the same can be said about politicians today and in years past. So, as you know, we have talked a lot about Woodrow Wilson and Colonel Mendel House. We've talked about their creation of the League of Nations, the UN, UNESCO. We've talked about the creation of various global institutions. So, there was a distinct trend occurring, even all those years ago, and it was done in incremental steps. But let's speed up the timeline and jump to more modern examples. So the development of the global economy really hit its stride in the 70s and 80s. And another point that's really interesting is the fact that the first World Economic Forum meeting occurred in 1973 with the likes of Klaus Schwab and Henry Kissinger. But really it was through the introduction of the petrodollar, the global reserve currency, and the development of China, Southeast Asia, etc. Okay, so politicians routinely gutted American manufacturing and sent it overseas. to the point that now we have distinct regionalization of services. We now have one region of the world that handles a majority of the manufacturing of global products, and this includes even important and strategically vital products such as medications. We are all dependent on each other, and unfortunately, the United States became the consumers. Our job is to apparently buy all the shit products other nations produce. Again, something I resent. Now, okay. Perhaps that's a cynical and narrow view of our role. However, we could be even more cynical and jaded if we want to, because we could toss in our role as the global military arm. Yes, the military-industrial complex maintains the liberal world order, the liberal economic order, just making sure that the machine isn't screwed with, or shit, you could even consider the US as the bank of the world. Our tax dollars bail out everyone constantly. But okay. The economy evolved in such a manner that we are all dependent on each other, for the most part, and decoupling those economies seemed to be an impossible task. And really we should consider, is that even something we would want to do? Because, I don't know. It's hard to say because I don't know what the world would be like without these systems. However, one thing I do know for sure is that there is a path forward. Back to the main question I have. How did the timing work out for this global transition so damn well? I mean, shit. I don't even know how to describe exactly what I mean. In the grand scheme of things, we know that they were incrementally moving towards a global system. They have been openly talking about this since the very beginning. Now let's consider the limits to growth. So I highly disagree with their assessment of modern society, in the sense that they claim by 2030, all resources will be used up, mass death will arise, and civil unrest will occur. And this will be our reality. So their solution is to intentionally reset the world. Now, I think there are parts of this that actually do make sense. I think we are at a point where we do need a reset of the system. Economically speaking, they screwed up everything so bad that I don't think there's another way. Now, they want to reset the world into a technocratic digital prison system, removing free will and creating a carbon-based economy, where every transaction is traced, every move you make is tracked, and every decision made is influenced by a centralized government agency. Now, on the other side of the coin, I feel like we should reset the system and go in the other direction. Perhaps a new gold standard, decentralization for sure, and who knows, maybe a convention of states to reset us back to a constitutional republic. Maintaining national sovereignties is massively important, and re-establishing the separation of powers is key. But overall, I'm not sure. We'll need to consult someone much more intelligent than me to get some real solutions, and maybe I'll look into that for a different video. However, back to what we were talking about. One of the aspects that I believe the Founding Fathers couldn't estimate was the exponential growth. And through this, the federal government continued to grow and grow, becoming the bloated, self-serving, corrupt establishment that we have today. And then from there, I guess we should take into consideration the technological accelerationism. Technology has dramatically changed how the entire world operates, the entire system, and it actually allows us the chance to see the truth. So technology, and in general, the development of communication systems, have allowed us the opportunity to see through the illusion. We can now see the system for what it is, far more easily than other generations were able to. So naturally, as a result of this, trust begins to break down, as of course we are exposed to the lies more and more. We can see how everything is dictated by special interest groups, dark money, corporations, and yes, we can even see how the government is merging with the private sector. I mean, for example, we got two stories that really kicked things off this week. We had Mark Zuckerberg openly admit that the FBI came to them to tell them to censor the Hunter Biden story. Nothing to see here, just a billionaire with a monopoly on information censoring accurate news stories at the behest of the FBI to favor a political party and a certain outcome. However, we also found out this as well. We found out that baby food corporations were, more than likely, paying off the FDA. Yes, they were paying off the FDA in order for the corporations to be able to sell contaminated baby food. These massive corporations are lobbying against safety standards and even got the FDA to change their recommended levels of arsenic in baby food. Yeah, they found out that 94% of baby food had levels of arsenic that were higher than the accepted levels. Now, for me, personally, baby food should have zero arsenic. But that's just me. Anyway, some of these levels were so high that it's truly, truly shocking. Anyway, the main point is that corporations are paying off regulators to maximize profit and poison innocent civilians. This happens across the board. It's a massive problem with Big Pharma too. The whole system is corrupted, every sector. But let's get back to the FBI for a second. We found out that the FBI and intel agencies are colluding with tech companies to ensure that they maintain power. And people don't seem to take this seriously. All of these tech companies have contracts with the government, working with the CIA. They're handling surveillance, domestic spying operations, they're changing narratives. They're even doing international spying as well. I mean, we even found out that there are Twitter executives who are working with foreign governments to subvert the US political system. The big tech collusion with government is corporatism, which is exactly why the Democrats are coming out and saying that Republicans are fascists. It's all projection. The Democrats are clearly the fascists, by definition. It's all about Saul Alinsky tactics. I can't believe people are saying that individual liberty, states' rights, and limiting the power of the government is fascism. It's so damn stupid. All it is rules for radicals, projection. But anyway, I'm getting off track. We also have the government following Klaus Schwab's plan for public-private partnerships, taking over or gaining a massive say in the private sector in order to meet their Agenda 2030 goals. This is happening across many different sectors, and it's creating an insane centralized force. I mean, what other proof do we need that the system is collapsing? We don't even have mainstream media organizations with integrity. You have to find small, up-and-coming companies, independent commentators, or citizen journalists to find out the truth. As they say, if you don't pay attention to the news, you are uninformed. If you pay attention to the news, you're misinformed. Either way, you're fucked. And on top of it all, 90% of the world's wealth is consolidated into the hands of the top 1%. They've won the game. They have all the cash. But from there, the feds just keep printing money, devaluing the dollar, using their power to control markets, using capital to sway politicians, lobbying against basic standards to increase profit margins, and with politicians no longer serving a larger ideal, they've become solely interested in personal wealth generation over fulfilling their actual duties. For decades, the entire economic model of the US has been to maintain the illusion. Now, okay, perhaps they are buying into a larger ideal. Global governance. If you look around at every aspect of the system, it seems to be breaking down. Congress doesn't even function as intended. Ideological lines have been drawn, and only one side compromises. The left just keeps marching towards their total control agenda. And this is why we see every president now act through executive order. Congress has no function at this point. It is deadlocked. With this hegemonic global political philosophy, they are attacking the judicial system, trying to pack the Supreme Court. They are trying to get rid of the filibuster, and they are trying to change election laws. They are deliberately getting rid of checks and balances on power, because I think they know that the system is broken. When a political system is broken, no longer functioning as intended, well, it's an opportunity for corrupt power-mad sociopaths to make their move, and I think that's exactly what we are seeing. However, back to the main point, I know I keep getting distracted. But it is interesting to me that the timing worked out so well. Now let's just say that they knew the system was irreversibly effed. And really, there have been many rumors circulating within government that around the year 2000, that they knew the United States as originally intended was in fact over. According to Catherine Austin Fitts, who worked under George Bush, said that's when they started funneling assets to offshore accounts. And then of course we know, right before 9/11, trillions and trillions of dollars, quote unquote, went missing. And then of course, they slowly began marching towards this global agenda. Wait a second though, wait. The United States government and Nancy Pelosi signed on to Agenda 21 back in 1992. So could the fact that we signed on to these global agreements indicate a massive paradigm shift? I don't know. But what I do know is that this agenda really sped up after this moment. So let's just say, again hypothetically, that they knew something really big happened, and that it was just a matter of time until it all came collapsing down. Well, if that's the case, then of course they would continue fleshing out global frameworks. You know, when Obama was president, Obama came out and claimed that the United States needed to get ready for a lowering of living standards, that our GDP would never exceed a certain amount again, and that manufacturing is forever dead in the United States. A perpetual recession. However, the timing of the technological singularity comes into play as well. The US military believes that this would occur around 2035. And then of course we have Agenda 2030, which aims to remake the global economy by 2030. And at the same time, from the 2016 election onward, everything quickly, very, very quickly became unraveled. The loss of trust in institutions, the breakdowns regarding checks and balances on power, the merging of the government with corporations, the eroding of basic freedoms, and the continued assaults on the founding principles really ramped up our demise. All of this contributed to our current situation, and it all seems to revolve around that date, 2030. Is it accelerationism? Was it all simply inevitable? Was it all a coincidence? One event led to another, so on and so forth, until we got to this moment. Or was it all carefully planned and implemented? Could it just be a mix of the two? Inevitable growth, corruption, technological expansion, which of course led to more federal power. The Middle Eastern wars led to domestic surveillance through the Patriot Act. And then of course we get the rising economic uncertainty, and yes, the collapsing of economic systems, which would lead to the misguided resurgence of socialism and communism. You know, it's hard to say, but a lot of this seems to be following a plan rather than just random coincidences. Social engineering and the deliberate dumbing down of populations must also play a part in the development of this new technocratic slave system. I mean, we know a lot of this is a plan. They openly talk about it, Agenda 2030, the Great Reset. But I guess it's just hard to wrap my head around how perfect their timing is, how perfect their timing was between past events, and, of course, hitting their target dates. Essentially, all aspects of society are breaking down at the exact time that they were planning. Now, could it all be a perfect storm of calamities? Well, I'm not so sure. Manufactured calamities is more like it. I mean, to me, there are just too many coincidences to simply consider this all to be the natural progression of civilization, but rather, it shows a small percentage of people at the top are orchestrating the collapse of the system, all in order to build a new system, to have a new era of growth, and a new era of complete control over the world. The culmination of humanity's previous attempts at world domination, and this time, if everyone sits this out, they will succeed. It's on the people to decide what happens next. As James Paul Warburg said, we will have world government whether you like it or not. The only question is whether that government will be achieved by conquest or consent. They are trying to get this accomplished through manufactured consent, because I strongly believe going the route of conquest will prove to be a fool's errand. The people of the world are standing up against this in mass. I mean, Pakistan. Yes, the Middle East is protesting due to Agenda 2030 initiatives. People took to the streets after receiving huge utility bills, and that's despite the fact that they are spending 12 to 16 hours a day in a blackout. Argentina is back at it. Bangladesh is protesting. There's a nationwide strike and protest occurring in South Africa. And of course, it's against the rising cost of living, power cuts, and mass unemployment. And while the global uprisings continue, I'll have to do another video about this, and I'm collecting more footage every day. So I guess just let me know what you think. Is there any way to sufficiently describe what we are seeing? Is it a perfect storm of calamities? Or do you think it's all by design? If I had to pick a possibility to hang my hat on, I would say it's all by design. Well, a failure by design. 'Cause the people just won't comply. Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. But of course, make sure you disobey those true fascistas. And as always, I do hope you have a good night.